I'm so happy to have you guys here. I feel like selfishly today, I really need some therapy.
We're here for you, girl.
And I was like, it's so funny that I literally have Vanessa and Dené on today. And I said this to you off camera, but I feel like I have to say it here. Because I just had like such a deep cry today. And it was interesting how it came on though, because I feel like, and you guys can dive into this deeper, it wasn't about the thing that I was.
What is it about the thing?
Because it was like a happy cry and then it turned into like an ugly cry. I think I opened up the space to stop for a minute and not push through and to feel. And then I couldn't stop crying.
Yeah. You said you opened up the space. I feel like we talk about you can't selectively numb. And a lot of times when we start to be open to feeling anything, all of a sudden it's all of these things that I didn't even realize were there start to come to the surface. That's beautiful, but
yeah,
that's what happened. And then it also made me just come back to, it's been a while since I've had a session with my therapist.
Well, time to check in.
I'm like, here we are.
Right? But does that happen a lot? Because you're both in practice still working with patients.
Yeah.
Dené, you are a marriage and family psychotherapist. And Vanessa, you are a psychotherapist.
Same. Yeah, we're same.
Okay. Same.
Yeah.
What is it about therapy where, like, I'm such a believer in therapy. It's really, really helped me see myself, to be able to understand why I behaved the way that I did for almost the majority of my life and feeling as if that was normal and okay because of my childhood circumstances, right? And then to really stick with the work is where it starts to reveal itself in such a different way. And it just makes you more self-aware and to know like, yes, those things happen to me, but the behavior in which I'm responding to it isn't okay. And I need to change the way I deal with things that are coming up.
Yeah. I love that you say that. I think, Vanessa and I come from a background in depth psychology, and I always say depth because people think I'm saying depth psychology.
Or death.
Yes. And it's really the study of the unconscious and the collective unconscious in a lot of ways, but it's, framed in a lot of Jungian psychology. And Carl Jung said, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life and we will call it fate. And I think so much of what we experience through our lives is like, this is my personality, or this is just the way I react to things, are actually the ways that we are responding to our pain points that have gone unaddressed, right? So a lot of what therapy is just giving us an opportunity to slow down enough to make that unconscious conscious, right?
Yeah, I also think too, and I love that you said, I wanted to kind of put a little pin in when you said, the way that I'm behaving is not okay. And I felt a little bit of like I wanted to kind of give you a little compassion in that because there's a little bit of like beating yourself up for like, I shouldn't be acting this way.
Yes.
Right. And no long-lasting change has ever come through beating ourselves into change. Right. It's only been through loving ourselves into change. And so because I similarly, I've been in therapy for myself 15, 20 years, on top of also doing this work. And you really want to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. When I slip into old patterns and behaviors and I beat myself up for it, I have to like remind myself, what's going on where you felt like you needed to go into survival mode? What's going on where it felt like you weren't safe enough to be in your highest self? And so it felt safer to go back to what you know or what you knew, right? And maybe asking myself some of those questions sometimes I have found to be a little bit more helpful than being like, God, Vanessa,
right?
Cut the shit.
Yes. It's so true. I feel like when you said that, I was like, oh, you're right. Like I find myself doing that a lot where I'm like, I have been doing this work for so fucking long. Why the hell?
Thought I did this already.
Yeah. Like it is that feeling though, where you're like, is it ever going to feel like I can almost like even handle myself, my emotions, my actions? And
I think it's such a misunderstanding that we're conditioned to have of what the human experience is. And that, I believe this is a life school and that we came here to learn about ourselves and expand, but also that the reason that we keep feeling like we're circling around the same lessons, and this is something we've talked a lot about, is that it is like we revisit things, but that's what we're meant to do. We sort of live in a linear society that believes like problem, solution, broken, fix. Like people constantly come into therapy and they're like, I just want to fix this already. I just want this to be done. Right. And it's like, well, that's not actually how the experience of being human is. And like, yes, we will revisit the same things, but I often think it's like a spring, like we're ascending, we're growing, we're becoming bigger versions of ourselves. But yeah, we need to revisit these lessons, but it's through a different lens in the way that I've grown.
Do you find, because I've found this within myself, where like right now I love the therapists that I work with, but then I'll go through these moments where I'm just like, I'm good and busy. Like it's not just that I don't want to do it. I'm just, you get overwhelmed and swallowed, and it feels almost like there are these seasons where it's needed.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's normal, right? Like,
you do.
I tell people all the time, they come in, especially when I start with a new client, I always say, let's try to commit to 6 weeks consistently to start.
Once a week.
Right? Once a week for 6 weeks when you're first starting. And then at 6 weeks, we have a check-in. Where are you feeling? Like, what are you feeling right now? Where are we at on the things that you came in with, right? And then we decide, do we keep going every week? Do we go to every other week? What feels good? And then it's also like, if you feel like you're in an okay place, then you're in an okay place, and that's fine. And you have my number. And you know where to find me. And if you feel like you need to check in, you let me know. I do the same thing with my therapist. This is a busy month. I'm writing, I'm finishing my book, and I'm like, I love you, but I need some space and distance from you.
From everyone in life.
I need to not be examining myself right now. I need to just be busy and working.
Right.
And so he's like, all right, I'll see you in a month,
Right. I mean, I feel like that almost feels like it gives me almost this permission to be like, okay, because I do find with the things that have helped me the most with just honestly my mental health and regulating my nervous system and just feeling like I can manage things in a way where it's not completely tearing me down. Like even just like a situation in life where, years ago, even just a few years ago, like if there was a challenge or something, like it would rock me for weeks.
Yeah.
And now it's like I have tools that I know really work.
Yeah.
Staying very consistent with meditation, because a non-meditative version of me is different. Yep. I'm sharper. I'm spicier.
Yeah.
I will nip. I will.
Same, bro.
I'm sharp. I mean, Vanessa and I grew up together, by the way. We rode the same kind of bus to school, and that bus could be a little. We were just
I got kicked off
sharp.
That bus. When you're so there, we both got kicked off.
Yeah,
that bus.
You did get kicked off that bus, actually,
for being too spicy.
We've all, yes, we have a very spicy way of being.
We do.
And by the way, I love that. I love that I have access to that side of me, because you don't just like get rid of it, but it's there if you need it. However, I don't want to walk through life like being so quick on the tongue with everything. It doesn't read well, right? In a lot of situations.
It doesn't set you up for the kind of, I think, because similar, like it doesn't set you up also for, I think, the depth of relationship and connection that you want to have. I think it's a really good tool, protective tool, take no shit tool. Like you said, you can access it when you need it. Dené accesses it in me, I think, sometimes.
Sometimes I just carry my bulldog with me.
I'm like, can you bring that upstate New York into that? I'm like,
she's like,
no,
literally.
Earrings out, just get in there real quick.
Yeah, you got a little bit of
and now I meditate.
Yeah, exactly. It's literally one and the same. Like you bring that all to the meditation pillow.
Totally.
But through truly staying consistent with the things, right? Even like the green juice and the gouache, it all really does add up.
Yeah.
And I find the one thing where I find the most inconsistency is truly therapy. Like, but it's been like this for years for me. And I think today it was just honestly wild that you're both here with me. And I had this moment where I was like,
Is it wild though?
It's time, honey. No, it's not.
We would
because
call
that's
it
how life
synchronicity.
works.
That's synchronicity.
Life synchronicity.
Yeah. But I think that there's something in, I don't know. I think there's something in just a place where I tell the truth. Like I always, and I think this is a line from, I can't even remember whose book right now, but find a place where the truth is told and let yourself sink into that. A lot of times that's Vanessa for me, like that person where I am safe to tell the deepest truth that I'm not talking about as I'm moving through life. But for so many of us, that's therapy. I say the things that I can't say anywhere else in the world. And it's like, it takes some of the power away from the shame that we're holding around the truths that we're not speaking. So it's like, people a lot of times when they aren't doing regular therapy or like, what, or have never done it, are like, what do you even do? You just like go in there and you start talking about yourself. Like, what is that life? And I'm like, you'd be amazing how healing it feels just to tell someone these things that you've never told anyone. And it's all confidential. So it's all perfect.
It's so true. That is what continually, I think, is what has kept it in my life that I, maybe not as consistently, but I always come back to it because I used to be the person who would tell everyone in my life everything.
The overshare.
Yeah, big overshare. I think that's why this podcast works.
I get it.
However, now even just, it's like being a mother and a wife and having a business, being a CEO, having an online presence. Like, I can't tell everyone everything anymore. Plus, my trust within people has literally grown to like the size of a pea. And I've become so protective of just giving even my energy to people that it's been that one safe, sacred thing that I feel really safe, like just bearing my soul.
Yeah. The therapist in me is like wanting you to say more about the ways that trust has been eroded and that your circle has had to become smaller.
Yeah.
And does that feel like the relationships that I do have are more sacred now and have sort of like through the test of time, I would imagine it like it takes longer to get there.
It does. I'm a very tough person to let you into my life. I've always been that way. I think, Vanessa, you can probably understand why, just growing up and like with me and being in our house. There weren't many people I even had come over my house growing up because
it's like
I was also ashamed of.
That was, I was just going to say,
I was embarrassed. There were a lot of things, but Vanessa was always someone that I felt really comfortable being around, and truly Chrissy, like that was it growing up.
Oh, and little Rachel.
Rachel too. I know. I love Rachel. Where is she today? But it is something I'm super aware of.
Yeah.
And I feel like in the past few years, I opened up where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna let more people. And then it's like I got burned a few times by people that I really felt would probably never do that to me. And I think that just closes you back up. And it has entirely changed my relationship with the people that I hold close to my heart.
Yeah, I think it's because we talk a lot about vulnerability in our society. And I love the way Brené Brown talks about vulnerability as something that is sacred. I can tend to swing a little bit more in the like hyper independent realm. We were just talking about this last night that
through tears
that like there's ways that we armor up through our life experiences and through ways that we've been hurt in ways that, we can understand so many things rationally and still our visceral animal response is to like keep ourselves safe. And so it's tough. It's this like balance between I want connection and I want to be authentic in my relationships. And it is sacred to let people into our tender bits. And we got to do it in places that have like earned that. I think it is a sacred thing that we earn.
It is interesting too, because I feel like I've worked with a lot of women, not so much men, but a lot of women who have like the overshare kind of, and I feel like I'm very similar. Or at least I used to be, right? And then similar track, right? Now you have a little bit more of a social presence and now you have a child and I'm like very protective. And so it's changed my relationship to oversharing. But in my experience, I'm curious to know like what you think about this, but oversharing actually, in my experience for a lot of women, is actually a way to not be vulnerable.
Ooh.
It's a way for you to pretend that you're being vulnerable and open, but it's actually a way to guard against vulnerability. So basically what we can do with oversharing is like, I'm going to put all of it out there so that you have the opportunity to judge me, shame me, dismiss me now. Like, let's just get this out of the way. Let me show you all my messy bits so that you can do what I know you're going to do, which is like judge me, close off, whatever. And I'm not going to be surprised if I slowly get deep with you and then suddenly you do that to me.
Wow.
So it's like a protective mechanism, right? I dump it all out there. Go ahead.
No, yeah. I think that's true.
Yeah. And I think when we get older, especially, I think in kids and whatever, we start to just be more, the vulnerability feels more authentic when we are vulnerable, or like you said, sacred. There's a sacredness to it.
Yeah. And I wonder, as you say that, I think something I've heard you speak to is that there's a way that we can share vulnerably when it's clean versus the mess of it. And that's definitely something I'm guilty of. And
what do
you've called me out on. Like, let me process this. Let me clean it up. Once I understand it, now I'll be vulnerable and share it with you. And I do that a lot because I'll be like, no, I'm an open book. Like, ask me anything you want, Melissa. And
right.
It's once I'm really clear that like, it's not going to like activate me. I'm not a mess around it. Like, I'm clear with this. And that still isn't necessarily vulnerable because I don't want you to see my mess.
Okay.
Yes.
This is so interesting that you're saying that, because I feel like today was almost an example of me wanting to open up more online. And it's so funny because as I am like, I feel like the first time I opened up, even years ago, about having an eating disorder was online.
Yeah.
I felt safe doing it there. And it's wild because even my closest best friends to me, I didn't want to tell them, but I started sharing it online because there is this protective layer until the haters come. And then you're like, oh, wait, they're all out there. But you can't focus on that. But where I feel this sense of safety and almost like security to be myself, because there's that layer between the lens of, okay, but you can't.
But even in therapy, that's a thing, right? Like there's a very common thing in therapy where you feel more comfortable sharing things with your therapist when you've like first started. And the more comfortable you become and the deeper that relationship becomes, it actually becomes harder for you to tell them things. So even in the therapeutic relationship, we see that happen. I feel more connected to you. I feel more vulnerable with you. And so now I'm a little bit more guarded of what I'm going to share with you. Whereas like when we first started seeing each other, I lay it all out there. And so it feels like yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I mean, I think therapy, just like with any other relationship, there becomes a deep connectedness. There becomes like, you see me, and those old ways of protecting ourselves start to kind of come up, even in that kind of relationship. And we can be aware of it, and we can try to challenge our, bad habits. But I think it's a pretty normal thing if you're the kind of person who grew up guarded.
Well, you know what it is, actually. And I like at first when you said that, I was like, no, I don't think that's true. My therapist is like my mama oracle. And then as you kept speaking, I was like, but there's a codependency.
That's it.
Because times that I've been mad at her, it has been so hard to talk to her about it. Because I, like maybe there wasn't safety in maternal relationships early in life. And it's like, if I'm not pleasing to you, if I am mad at you, are you going to turn away from me? And she's like, Dené, you can be mad at me and I'm not going anywhere. And it's like,
that's what you've done for me. Same thing.
Same girls. But yeah, I think that there's a codependency in that you're describing. But what you were saying, Melissa, about like Vanessa and I will put on retreats for
love
women.
them, by the way. Love.
And it's so fascinating how easy it is for me to like sit in front of a group of women, like 30 to 40 women, be unbelievably vulnerable, like all my stuff. And yet there's like a distance to that. And then like someone will come and talk to me after, and like I'll be like, ugh. Like it's just all of a sudden I feel so much more vulnerable in the intimacy than I do in like a larger space. So that's
right.
fascinating.
I think it's because it's like a bear, you're bearing it right there. And I had a therapist who really, I think, helped me, almost like save me from myself when I was in a lowest of lows. But I used to lie to her all the time.
All the time it happens.
Oh yeah. She was almost like that mama bear energy that I really needed, who would call me, as she would say, it feels as if you are under the influence of something right now. And I'd be like, no. And she's like, okay, there's this very, like almost self-conscious confidence that I feel. And then I was like, I'm on Adderall. And she's like, okay, but I needed that. But I told her for a while, oh no, like I'm fine. I'm not binging anymore. And then it would slowly come back out because I think the wounds would open in our session, even though I was trying not to tell her.
God bless her for going there, because I feel like there are a lot of schools of therapy that don't. Like they're like, just sit and witness and like let it, like wait till they're ready to talk about it.
I can't work with those types of therapists.
That's not actually supportive. Like we've talked about like our personality types. If you do that, like we'll lie to you for like years, or we'll just stop coming.
How did you two connect? Because your podcast is amazing. Aww. Laura loves it. Like my sister, she's like, I listened to it. Like it's helped so many people. Like, how did you join forces?
Well, Vanessa found me in the cafeteria.
Adopted the introvert.
So I'm extremely introverted. And on the first day of grad school, I walked in and it was like the first day of school again. And I was like, oh, lots of new people. And so I found a table and sat by myself and was like, this was a mistake. Why did I come here? I don't want to be with all of these strangers. And then all of a sudden I looked up and there was like this angelic face glowing and just like, hi. Sat her tray down and just started talking to me like we'd known each other for like no joke, just like we were continuing a conversation. I was like, what is happening? Who is she? Like, do we know each other? And then she kept talking. We talked for a minute and then the bell rang for us to like go to our first class or whatever. And she was like, all right, you ready? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, yeah, I just like adopted her. I was like, I just knew we were going to be friends. I was like, I love that you knew.
So special.
Yeah.
This was how many years ago?
2015.
Okay.
Almost 10 years.
So a long time.
Yeah.
And you're not in practice together. You have the podcast together.
I mean, we both have our individual
but you do the retreats
practices. And then we have a company together and we have our podcasts and our retreats and projects and stuff together. And then we have our own therapy practices and book writing and all that jazz too.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Amazing.
It's
really you guys have this, I think what feels so special. I mean, I say that truly, like, I think we're all special in our own unique ways, but there's just something about the two of you that it feels like you've weaved this spiritual sense to therapy and where it's very rooted in like the soul. Like it just, there's something that feels very different and like it's very wholehearted. Like
I think that was why we started the podcast too, was because when we found our way to the school that we went to, and both of us obviously made our own way there individually without knowing each other, it was at the time, that was when I left New York. I went to school, I moved to California to pursue grad school, left a relationship, everything, right? Packed some suitcases, left everything behind because it was one of only 2 schools in the whole country that was a Jungian school. And I just knew that I needed a soul-based approach to healing. And depth psychology is called the psychology of the soul. That's what it's known as. And we get told that a lot. I think what's really interesting about our energy is like we always say it's like the yin to the yang, right? Like I'm a Taurus. I'm super grounded, very embodied. I'm like, and I'm also a New Yorker. So I'm like super to the point, straight shooter, cut through the bullshit. And then Dené can kind of bring it to like the elevated, like spiritual ether. And then sometimes I like bring her back down to earth. And then sometimes she kind of breaks me up, So I think there's a balance. It's like the through line is soul. But like so much of my approach to soul is through the body and through tangibility and through my feet on the ground. And so much of her approach to soul is like through the higher kind of spiritual concepts. And so I think they weave really well together.
They do.
Are you an Aries? What?
Sagittarius.
Okay, for some reason I was thinking
I love
April.
Aries, though.
Yeah.
I get along really well with Aries.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on and really talk about just avoidant styles.
Well, you got the two experts here. We're both avoidant, so go ahead.
We're happy to.
What are the styles, right? There's secure, avoidant, and anxious. Am I missing
and
one?
disorganized as well.
Disorganized.
Yeah. And I think the way that what we've noticed.
That was a yes.
Where do we go with that?
Right. There's a lot of conversations, which we love, about like attachment styles being so normalized in the cultural vernacular. And there's a way that they're really being talked about as though they're a form of identity. Now, we can certainly run a little bit more avoidant or anxious in our attachment styles, but what Vanessa and I really love to bring forward is the conversation around their energetics. They are ways of being that are based on what is happening relationally between us and another person. So Vanessa and I both tend to run pretty avoidant in our attachment energy, but if we are in relationship with someone who is really anxious, is really avoidant, we will all of a sudden feel very anxious. It's like the two energetics sort of cancel one another out, or you will create magnetic energy no matter what. And a lot of times we're both so avoidant that like one of us will be anxious. And like,
right.
The other one.
Can you break them down? Just like, I feel like it says it, but just like a high level so that people can understand.
The way I like to talk about attachment, I mean, like you said, it's a pendulum, right? So I think it's really important that we all start thinking about it like that. It's fluid. We can dip in and out. Like you said, it's energetic.
It could be a
it's
few.
Not fixed. Yeah. In one day.
And we will in one day. Like
totally.
Fluctuate.
Yeah. But really what it is, it's like, these are kind of learned ways to cope with or react to anxiety. Right. And so when we're feeling anxious for whatever reason, because some would say that the more avoidant style is actually even more anxious than the more anxious style, right? So even using that language is kind of confusing. They're all ways of coping with anxiety or responding to anxiety. So when my attachment system gets activated and I'm feeling some sort of anxiety or discomfort, do I react by leaning in and kind of wanting to pull in closer and maybe like cling? Or do I react by like putting my wall up, backing off, feeling like I'm going to be engulfed? Like, oh, this is too much for my system. I'm about to be completely engulfed. I need to back up and create space, right? And so it's the dance that we play when our system is activated. Like, where do I feel like I respond? Leaning in or backing off, right? And
I think what's important to understand about attachment energy is no matter what, it's always about control in terms of our relationship with another person. And so if I tend to run a little bit more anxious, I attempt to control people relationally by keeping them close to me. If I tend to run a little bit more avoidant, I attempt to control relationship dynamics by pushing people away. But either way, it's not really me in an authentic sense of self, because I'm still not feeling safe enough to be me, and I have to control another person in order to be okay in my skin. So the work is to come to a little bit more of a secure attachment energy. Nobody lives there. We love to say, like, people talk about, like, I'm looking for someone with a secure attachment. And we're like, well, we're all looking for that unicorn. But that unicorn does not exist. But the work is to practice creating a sense of security within
yourself.
Yes.
That's right. Right.
So that you can respond authentically, regardless of the anxiety or the situation. You don't have to attempt to control the situation by push-pull.
Right. I think that's what brings me to almost the foundation of therapy, right? I think a lot of people go to therapy because, I mean, at least even in my own circumstance of like feeling like everyone else is the problem, right? Or, I mean, Vanessa, you wrote an entire book about this with your husband, who's also a therapist. Husband?
Now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, just making
Didn't
sure.
used to be, but yes.
Okay. Which is amazing that you guys like have that partnership where you can even coexist and work together.
It's a lot. Love him, but it's a lot. There's a lot of times I should be like, you guys talk about this shit so
like,
much.
Are you tired? I'm tired listening to you guys
yes,
process.
I am, actually.
No, I just like, I mean, your book pretty much.
That's it. That was the relationship.
That's what we do.
It's not you, it's me.
It's not
me, it's you.
Because isn't that what we all think? That everybody else is the problem.
Well, that's kind of
often.
right.
Yeah.
So like as therapists, what do you even start with when someone I'm just so curious to know from that end of the spectrum of where do you start? What is that point to help people
see
crack
themselves
open and see themselves?
Yeah.
Well, I think what is unique about the way that we practice, and even whether it's retreats or our client work, Vanessa and I are so adamant about the power and personal responsibility. And I feel like this is something you talk about a ton as well, Melissa, that the only person we are ever going to be in control of in this life is ourselves. So from our perspective, a lot of the other clinical modalities talk a lot about how you can bring your partner to this place where you would like them to be, or how to communicate effectively to get your needs met. And a lot of times what it ends up being is a really disempowering dynamic when, I don't know about y'all, but I have never made a substantial change in my life for any other reason than something within me decided I was ready to stop doing whatever I was doing. But when it comes to our partners or our relationships, we really feel like if I just nag this person into submission or communicate my needs enough, they'll get there. And it just never works.
Ever.
Yeah. So I feel like so much of what we talk about is if this person never changes one iota, if nothing shifts even an inch, what are you going to do in this dynamic to make yourself feel differently and a little bit more empowered in your life?
You know what I just thought of? So before I left New York, I remember me and you and our friend Heidi, we haven't seen in a while, sitting at a bar together, all talking. You and I were both engaged at the time.
This is a long time ago.
I was engaged to my ex-fiance.
Yes.
And we were having this conversation. We were both on a precipice, on a cusp, right? We're both engaged. It was we both were, what are we going to do with our lives? We were in transitions, right? None of this stuff had started yet. Neither one of us had gotten married. I mean, it was and I remember both of us kind of talking because my ex still won't say it, would never say it, but definitely had some substance issues. And I remember you and I just talking about how do you know? How do you know this is the one? Wouldn't it be great if they just did a little bit more of this, or they were a little bit more like that, or they did a little bit more, And I think my solution to that was I had the realization that it was never going to happen, right? He had zero interest in evolution. Really, just zero, I mean, so much so that was probably one of our last fights where he was screaming at me going, we don't always have to be growing and changing. And I'm like, yes, we do.
100%.
And I was like, oh, okay, got it. I see what's happening.
This.
But then you also had that realization where you were like, oh my God, Noah is willing. He wants to have these conversations and these experiences, right? And so I feel like we were
in a different pace.
In a different pace, but that's fine.
But
he was still open.
The acceptance.
Yeah.
He was still open.
He was.
Right? And he is. And that was an important part of a relationship for you as it was for me. And so I had to let mine go and evolve in a different way. And you leaned into yours and it evolved in the beautiful way that it did, right? But it goes back to this idea of we cannot control another person. And I could have spent a lifetime attempting to mold somebody into what I thought they should be. Right? Which I'm not God.
I just got full body chills.
I'm not God. Who am I to say that that's how he should have been or shouldn't have been or
And it doesn't work anyway. And what's so beautiful about even the energy I just felt from you as you were talking about Noah, there's this thing that happens, and I'm primarily a couples therapist, but I watch the dynamics that play out constantly. And what ends up happening, I've discovered, is when we attempt to change our partner, the way they experience whatever we're saying is through the lens, the voice of the parent that criticized them.
The adolescent, right?
Right. And so
I don't want to
every part of me that wanted to be loved unconditionally by that parent hears whatever you're saying and is just subconsciously going to reject it because you should love me for me. And I might change it for a week or two, but inevitably I'm going to go back because I'm in resistance to being that thing that you need me to be in order for you to love me. And so actually, when we're in radical acceptance of our partner, they're a lot more likely to make that change that we're longing for a lot more quickly.
It's so true. It is just I have tried to change and I have done it all with all of them. And it just, and I can nag and I can be passive aggressive and I can say the nasty things and I can be mean.
Yeah.
Actually. And that's something that I don't love, but I'm aware of it. I know when it's coming.
I feel like I'm listening to myself
And
talk
they
right
do
now.
too.
Yep.
And I'm just like, you know what? Just give me the go, do the thing. Because I'm very controlling. I honestly didn't always see it, but it's like even going back to childhood, I'm like, I was running my household.
Same.
I mean, it's like, that's why my sisters, there was so much friction because I was constantly trying to drive the ship. And I think that is one of my leadership strengths. But you can't mold people into being who you think they should be.
But also that was how you survived childhood, right?
Yes.
And so this is like going back to even the very beginning of this conversation. We were talking about we don't throw that part of ourselves away and we don't shame ourselves for having that part of ourselves, you know? It served me well to also be running the ship, i.e. my house, right? And also it made my little girl feel a little bit less anxious to feel like I was in control and I knew what was best. And if everybody just did X, Y, and Z, because I could see that this is what would make everything easier, right? And it can be annoying as hell to be in relationship with me because I'm like, if you could just do this, everything would be easier. How do you
really
not
would
see?
though?
But there's an important messaging that you're giving that little girl every time you do that. And that's the thing that's important, because what the messaging you're telling that little girl is if I can just get this person to be controllable or comply with where I believe they need to be, that means I'm worthy of love and feeling seen and all of those things. And in that way, we're sort of abandoning that little girl. I mean, certainly our work first is to hold her with so much compassion around the things that she had to do for survival and the ways that that's still showing up, and then say, and who this person is in this moment is so unbelievably separate from your worthiness. Because she needs us a little bit more than that person who we believe needs to be controlled. She really needs us to stay with her, I have found in that moment.
Yes. And I think too, even with like your partner, like for me, it's, I've recognized it so much in Noah. The more I backed off, stopped saying certain things, just really let it be and truly embody the example of just like walking the walk, right? And like making this a way of life, that it doesn't have to be this rigid thing or this disciplined way of living and being. It becomes joyful the more that you do it, because you start to feel a different way. And when you feel different, you show up different, you love different, right? Like when you take care of yourself, you take care of everyone else in your life with so much more compassion and love. And I actually had a bunch of people reach out when we took the kids to Disney last week, and everyone's like, Noah looks so good. He looks so fit. And I'm like, that's all Noah. Like, they're like, what did you do? And I'm like, I didn't do anything anymore. Like, this was his own journey and pace of moving differently than I do, doing different things than I do, but just like almost meeting in a way that we're like, I'm very proud of him. And I do think it has enhanced our connection, but without me trying to threaten my way to getting my way. That doesn't work.
I think, you know, what you were saying before about
small threats, but
you're like, sometimes we still need to threaten a little bit.
Just like, you know, just like a little reminder threat.
Gentle reminders, as we like to call them. But, you know, what you were saying before, Melissa, about the way that we approach this work from a soul perspective. And I think so much of the couples work that I do and what made it a little bit different is if we think about ourselves as souls and that we are energetic beings, we are not just these bodies, I think that really shifts a lot of the way that we meet one another relationally. And what I started to understand as I was working with couples is exactly like you're describing with Noah, when we're in that energy of force, and it's very similar to the energetic dynamics of the avoidant and the anxious. So if I am in that space of anxious energy trying to cling to someone who is avoidant, they will run away from me. It's a pursuer distancer dance. But the minute that I sort of come back into myself and contain me, they'll be like, well, where'd you go? Right? And so if we understand ourselves as energetic beings, and that for me, the soul work is a lot of times understanding Noah is coming to certain levels of understanding about himself and his process and his journey. And each of us as souls, from my perspective, are really entitled to the dignity of that for ourselves. And I think we lose that a lot of times in relationships and feel like this person is mine. I get to manipulate and control them, and
no one
bring
belongs.
them.
Even your kids don't belong to you.
That's right.
They're their own separate little soul over there.
Their own path and their own journey and their own learnings and their own trials and tribulations. And we can't get in there. We can't mess it up. We got to stand back. We have to step back and let people live and experience, right? Again, even if that little girl in us thinks that we know what's best, you're robbing somebody of an experience, right? I mean, that's a lot of the Al-Anon work, right? It's just you think you're helping, but you're actually hurting.
That's so true. And it also just leads me to I think one of the greatest causes of suffering is just neediness. People feeling so needy of things and friends, and you should be here. And how do we even help our own children to gain this greater sense of independence and feel less needy towards every single thing?
To me, so much of the relational work is so similar to what you were just describing with Noah. I think the ultimate form of love is the respect and the dignity of your experience. And I think that is true of our children as well. I learned so much watching my son about when I'm in the space of, I believe in you, buddy. You got this, right? It's he rises to be that. And that is true in our romantic partnerships. That is certainly true in our friendships. And in our children as well. I think so much of our work as parents, I have found, is to step back a little bit and just allow the unfolding of who they are anyway. It's we believe and are taught we need to raise them to be good people. And it's where did we get the idea that they're not good people? These beautiful little Buddhas are the oracles that come here with all the things that we've forgotten that they're reminding us of. But it's how do we just allow them to become the person, people that they are meant to be, but a little bit stay out of their way and say I believe in you. I'm right here. I got your back, but you got this.
And I don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
And not trying to save them from everything. That's been one of the thing, my greatest challenge, right? It's when you see someone being tough to your kid at the park, what's your natural mama bear instinct? I'm well, no, but I
will trip a kid.
down. But I actually had a friend say to me, leave them alone.
Yeah.
And I started doing that, and to have them work through to resolve their own problems. It's so hard.
You actually are good at that.
Yeah, I'm actually really good at that, I will say.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it depends, right? If there's
obviously,
listen, there's a line, you know what I mean, as I roll up my sleeves. I've had some experiences where also you can tell there's some lack of parenting on the other side.
Oh, yeah.
And it's, and that's when I'll step in. I've been known to parent other people's children, and I have no shame in it.
You and I are one in the same, Vanessa. I'm literally running.
Are you going to, or am I going to?
Who's doing this?
You choose.
To the extent where my kid's I'm I don't know, ask on TV. He's oh man, she's going to say no, forget it.
Can I have a popsicle? I'm did you eat dinner? He's oh, God, he knows. But yeah, I mean, what's been really interesting is to watch them actually kind of have at it. It's been helpful, I think, also to bring other mothers and parents into my sphere who have similar approaches to parenting, meaning you've got this, I've got this, our eyes are on them, but we're also going to let them do their thing. And unless somebody's actively punching somebody in the gut, they can scream at each other. They can, and they come to me and I'm did you tell her that? What did you say to her? Well, then you need to go have that conversation, And I'm that sounds like a you problem. That doesn't sound like a me problem, And kind of giving her that push.
Right.
I mean,
for them to figure to work through it.
Yeah. And also, you were saying, seeing them in all of their humanness, I think I don't think I was, right? I don't think I was seen in all of my humanness. And I don't have blame necessarily. I'm not blaming for that, but I think just the reality of growing up tough and, not a lot of resources, single parent, it was very survival mode. right? And there wasn't a lot of access to the stuff that we're all talking about. In a lot of ways, this is privilege to be able to have these conversations and to be able to even like regulate your nervous system to the point of looking at my child and saying, you've got this, like you go handle it, to not be responding from this place all the time. Takes a lot of work and sometimes a lot of privilege. And so I don't blame for that, but I do realize like I wasn't seen for my humanity. I wasn't seen for who I was. I was seen for what I could do, how good I could be, how helpful I could be, how perfect I could be. And that's the thing that I'm very conscious of not doing to her, right? Is like, you don't have to be anything other than what and who you are for me to think you are just the fucking greatest thing on the planet, period.
Right. That's real. But I think also we talk a lot about we can only meet people to the extent that we've met ourselves. And I think that's really true of our children as well. I think we were raised by a generation of parents that were really taught, like, you don't show your children vulnerability.
Yes.
You have to pretend like you have all of the answers. I apologize to my kid on the daily. I'm like, well, mom fell short, but she's doing her best and sorry. And
like recognizing that you maybe said something.
That I'm human and I'm going to make mistakes. And when I do, or when I say something that hurt you or that didn't feel good, I want to hear about it and I can handle hearing about it. And it's not your job to take care of me.
Yes.
I'm the mama. So like, tell me all about it. I can hold that. But that, I don't want him to feel like he needs to be perfect. And so I have to model, it's okay for me not to be perfect, right?
Oof, that.
Oh, yeah. That's, I mean, it's literally that. And just, I mean, I think it's, you guys keep saying it, it's like the humanness. And just like letting us all feel safe being human and making mistakes
and I'll be okay if. I think that's a lot of that work, right? Like, especially with people who have a little bit more of that controlling tendency. So much of my work has been coming back to like that internal sense of safety. If I step back and I don't control and this doesn't go the way that I think it should, I'll be okay.
Right.
I know it. I know I can be okay. I know I will be okay. I've proven that to myself. I might be uncomfortable, but I'll be okay. I'll survive. And that's the practice daily. For me.
Daily. It's such a daily practice. And I mean, even when I said earlier that like, I do get to these points sometimes where I'm like, I thought I could maybe handle this differently, and just understanding that, for me and even just like the amount of growth that I've had and been able to recognize within myself, I know that I still have to wake up and I have to do it all over again.
That's right.
Every day. And like find that strength and the why and get myself there. When it's hard, Like this work is hard. It's very exposing and it's very vulnerable to even just be honest with yourself.
And I think there's something in it is hard. And I find what makes it hard is the feeling that we should be better, that we should be doing this perfectly, that I shouldn't be falling short.
Me. I'll own it.
And it's all of us. And it's so much of what's like conditioned in us. You were telling us right before we came on about how you'd posted something about, like you had some tears and 2 therapists are coming on and someone was like, are you okay? And I'm like, that is so much of our like conditioning is like, we should be good.
Oh yeah. No, I was like, oh, I'm fine now. Like, and she's like, are you my best friend? She's like, are you sure? I'm like, I'm listening to Taylor Swift's new album and it just like put me in a different space. But it's also, I'm sure it was like, can't deal with the rest of it. Like, it's like, I got some of it out, but we have things to do.
Yes. Compartmentalize it.
I've gotten really good at that. I wasn't though for years.
Well, and it's a skill. Listen, people come to me and we talk about compartmentalization in therapy, and I am like the master of compartmentalizing. And that's another one of those traits where I'm like, listen, it serves me well in certain areas and certain capacities. Like I'm the one you want in a crisis.
It's true.
I am. Like I'm the one that can put it in a box and I can be calm and I can be level-headed and I can make rational decisions and the world could be burning down around me. Now, is that a trauma response? Yes. But does it serve people well, and myself included? Yes. Sometimes it does, right? But do I want to live life like that? No. And so I think when you have a tendency to be somebody who compartmentalizes, I have found making it a conscious habit to give myself the time and space to unpack that a little bit and be with it. Even if I think I'm fine. I'm fine. No, I'm totally fine. I have like a practice of every once in a while just sitting and asking, like, are you fine? You good?
Like
And
in
then it's
meditation
yeah.
or just...
Sometimes in meditation, just sometimes in reflection, sitting outside. You know, for me, it's very nature-based. So like I could be in my garden and I could just be sitting in my garden and take a deep breath and just what's going on in my body right now. It's been a bit of a week, right? Are you okay? What's happening right now? And in those moments, that's when usually it's like and then there's some tears, or then there's like some anxiety or some residual things that I've put on the shelf to get through the week, that it doesn't feel safe or maybe appropriate in that moment to be in it.
Right.
You know, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with doing that as long as I've got the practice of acknowledgement and the practice of being with myself and the practice of not shaming myself when I don't have the willpower to compartmentalize it. And I just cry.
Yeah. Yes.
It's fine. So what? I cried. Okay.
Yep.
And I think all of that, like I think normalizing the mess to me is such a huge part of my mission, my work, my practice. But even like we were saying for our children, like I love to, because I didn't feel safe to be a mess a lot of times growing up. And I don't want that for him. I don't want him to feel like, you know, there's this fascinating thing that happens with kids. Like you're obviously you'll understand, but like when they first go to preschool, they'll hold in all of their mess and their like big tantrums and stuff until they come home to you. And then it's like, wow. And you're like, what happened? I heard you had a really good day. It doesn't feel like it, but it's like, it's not safe out there in the world, but here it's safe. Yeah. But I don't know, some part of me feels like that's also, and I'm a little bit obsessed with masculine and feminine energetics.
That's so funny. That's literally what I just, I didn't even look at my cards. I tried to just keep it very in the flow, but I was like, I want to move to the questions. But that was something I wanted to talk about. It's like the masculine and femininity within yourself.
Yeah. And I think there's so much about our societal structure that has been a really wounded masculine structure. It's very stoic. It's very keep it contained. It's very like, you know, show the highlight reels, but not the behind the scenes of your life. And to me, we are living through a period in time where we are returning to our healthy feminine and integrating that into our society and into ourselves more and more. But that is the mess. That's the big messy emotions that aren't contained.
That's why I'm really comfortable sharing that part of me online.
And that's so much of what I think people and I love about you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I get permission.
Yeah.
Well, because I'm just like, it can't always be so polished and perfect, which like I can really put on. But I'm just like, it will fucking weigh on you and literally beat you down if like that is something that like the high standard that you hold for yourself for every single day. It's exhausting, you know? And I think it was actually Dylan who said to me, she was like, I feel like if you could like share a little bit more of the, like when you're in the challenge, not after when you've come out with the bow. And I put the bow.
Yeah.
So it is like there's this real surrender that I feel when I'm just like, you know what, I don't care. Like people, whatever, make fun of me for laughing online. I'm actually really comfortable doing that because I'm comfortable being vulnerable.
Yeah. And well, but sometimes the feedback that we get makes us feel like, oh, should I not be vulnerable? Should I not be crying? And a lot of times that's with so much love, the people around us aren't comfortable with their tears or aren't comfortable with their mess. So when you do that, it's like, no, we don't do that.
Right. You don't do that
up,
online.
right? Like, what are you doing? And I think our work is to be like, oh, this is okay. And like, we all get to be a little messy. It's healing for all of us. What if we all put down our armor and we're in this mess together a little bit more?
I've definitely noticed as like things have grown with my business and just like in life that I've embodied so much more masculine energy where I think obviously to an extent is needed, but I feel like it's gone really tiring and I'm just like, no, I really want to lean into my femininity and just not try to be so strong and like just gear up and get through everything, you know?
If I may, though, Melissa,
yes,
as
please.
someone who watches your content and witnesses the way that you move through the world, I actually think you're someone that I would sort of hold as an archetype of like a really beautiful integration of masculine and feminine, because there's a way that, yes, you are like, women, we can do this, we can make it happen, like we can be in that action, like fearlessly in such an empowering, inspiring way. And the other day I was watching something you were talking about where you were saying, like you were talking about the vulnerability of like being happy all the time. And oh my God, do I feel that? Like when you get to a place in your life where I'm of a certain age, I've been through some shit and I'm not going to apologize for my joy.
No.
Like I've earned this, I've worked for this, but so much of the like shaming of that I feel like we'll like experience. And there's a lot of like, that's just bypassing. She's not happy all the time.
Oh yeah,
like,
always.
All of that energy comes in and it's like, no, actually that's healthy feminine. That is allowing ourselves to be childlike and feel, yes, the difficult emotions, but also the celebration and the joy in life, and that we get this one life that we are celebrating now. And I don't know, as I watch you move through the world, I'm like, oh no, sister, I feel like you're such an integration of both to me, because we are meant to be in our masculine energy in certain areas. But yeah, you bring the feminine.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like maybe I notice it at home where sometimes I can just almost be like a little, it's like the quick on the tongue, the overbearing. I've got the, and it's just like, that's right.
And that's a big component. We talk about that, especially early motherhood. Now, yes, your kids are starting to transition. They're getting a little bit older. But how old is Eleanor? She's still what?
She's 5.
Yeah, she's still little.
I mean,
she's a baby,
But that's important to like
really
articulate what you're saying. Because I think a lot of times we think of motherhood as like really nurturing, feminine.
And the goddess.
Oh God, I'm like a beast.
It's not.
It's like contain, tackle, keep this child alive.
Like feeding, all of the things, right?
Yes.
And so with couples, a lot of times I really love to normalize the first 2 years of parenthood, at least, but certainly those years especially, it's like the battle of the alphas. Because in heteronormative dynamics, it's like a man is like, first of all, you are so in your masculine as a woman when you're a new mama that it's overpowering a lot of times to their masculine. And it's like, and you do this and get out of here and don't even
You're
try
not doing it right.
All of that. And it's like, whoa.
That thing.
Yeah.
Or how do you not know how to do that? Yeah. It's been how many years? How old are the kids?
Exactly.
I know. When I was pregnant and wasn't my husband at the time, but my partner looked at me and he's like, so when we come home from the hospital, like you just hold her in the car? And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And he's like, I mean, she's little. You just hold her in your, and I was like, car seats? And he's like, I thought she was too small. I thought you just held her. I was like, what in the Britney Spears am I getting myself into right now? Like, we do not hold our baby in the car. This is not 1965. But it's that where you're looking at them like, huh?
I'm like, in John's defense.
Because he has no experience.
John and I tend to be very similar energy.
John's amazing, by the way.
The best. I'm like, we are very similar and we love him. But I think before I had a child, my kid's dad was very like, I like worry about you because you're like all over the place and you're just so scattered. And I tend to live more in my feminine sometimes, like between V and I, like John does. And something kicked in. The minute this little child came out of me, I was like, listen, like get out of my way to protect this child. There was like this instinctual like rah that comes over us as mama bears. And I think it surprises us sometimes how much we're in that like protective instinctual thing. But the difference I have found today is we as women are doing it in the nuclear family system where we used to have an entire community and circle of mamas supporting us. And so it's really overwhelming to be that in like, I got to keep going. I got to keep going after I've been up all night. I got to like make sure this child is safe and alive. And it's so much that we are sort of like overly in our masculine in a way that can feel really draining and destabilizing.
Entirely.
And disconnecting from yourself, from your partner, from your friends, from everybody. You feel like it's all you. You feel like you're just completely alone in it because, you're so in that like hyper, again, it's like very survival, right? That you have no chance to even take a breath. I mean, God, I don't miss those early days.
Oh God, I'm just like breathing like, it really brings you back to, I mean, that's why it's like we have to be compassionate humans and really like see it through. I think people are so quick to judge and just say whatever they want to say online. I think there's just so much beauty in the way social media and technology has evolved, but it's also, it can literally, break people down. People take their lives over online bullies, and it's horrific. So I think it's just being able to see people.
Yeah. And I think that you do such a beautiful job, Melissa, of like really like normalizing the conversations around the hard, and something that like Vanessa and I are so passionate about. Like, let's be real about motherhood. Like, of course we love our babies. Of course we would die for them. And this is awful. Like, so much of the time.
Like, I love my child. I don't love parenting. There is a difference.
Parenting is very hard.
There is a difference. And also, I'm allowed to say that because I'm basically parenting alone, right? Like, yeah, I have one person, but that is not how we were meant to parent. I was doing research like for the book I'm writing right now, and they say on average, because there are still communities, this is not like long time history where forever ago this is what existed. There are still communities today on this planet that exist with that community structure, right? And they raise their children in collectivistic ways. And they say in those cultures right now, currently, on average, the bio mom does 30% of the parenting. 30%. Like, that is actually what we're supposed to be doing when we're in a community like that.
Right.
We're not supposed to be doing 80, 90%, 70% even.
Right.
And so when we say things like, let's be real about parenting and how hard it is, it's that. It's about being like, let's stop this whole like superwoman, supermom, which is an insult. Like, stop using that as some kind of like, oh, I'm bestowing this gift on you and telling you you're a supermom. Like, I'm offended by that, actually.
And it's an aspect of a wounded masculine paradigm that really rewards productivity and get right back to it. And how many weeks did it take you to bounce back from having a baby?
I can't with that language.
Yeah. And
there's no bouncing back. There's just a new road ahead.
You never bounce back.
You're going on a different road, and it's this direction, and just keep going forward.
One step.
Absolutely. But it's such a dishonoring of the feminine and the cycles of life. And that, no, we are not meant to be the maiden we were before we became mothers. We're in a new season of our lives and what that looks like, but we're just not taught to honor the cycles of life, as we were talking about before, and that like, no, we're meant to change and evolve and keep expanding. It's
so true. Okay, you guys, I got the most amazing questions. I opened up a Q&A box on social and just had people write in with their relationship questions. I have to say, of any time I've put up a Q&A box, it's never been so flooded. And I'm like, people will ask me great questions, but this was wild. It just goes to show, I think, how many people are out there probably not getting the support that they need. And it's expensive. Like you said, it's a privilege to go to therapy. No, it's not. I think there's so many amazing things out there now. And even your podcasts and your books. And we'll talk about your book coming out, Dené. But I feel like let's dive right in. The first question you actually did answer. A lot of people asked, how do you know if your partner's the one? And I feel like you answered it with going back to...
Yeah, John, I always kind of steal this from him, but he has this saying where he's like, is this relationship causing you to break up with yourself? And I love that. It's like such a succinct way of like looking inward and being like, in order to stay in this, do I feel like I have to actually break up from me? And I think if the answer is yes, then that should be a pretty clear...
You know, another one I heard the other day that I think is so good. If someone told you you're just like your partner, would you think that was a compliment or not?
Ooh. Oh, that's good.
Because I think I often say to couples, inspiration, respect, and a shared vision are the three components that I believe every partnership needs to thrive. But if you don't have a deep reverence for who your partner is, if like someone says you're just like that person, you're like, that's information.
Ooh, that is information. That's Emotions are information. And I think you get this
visceral response.
You get this feeling. It's so funny. As soon as you said that, I literally thought to myself, there is no one I respect and love more than my husband. Like, I'm just like, he's such a man, you know?
Like, he is. And if you don't feel that about that person, you really need to ask yourself, why am I with him? Real talk.
So good. Okay. How to let go of what could have been.
Well,
you want to take this one, sis?
And I'm like,
Yeah, I think it's all unfolding perfectly. And I annoy people when I say this, but I don't believe in regrets. I think there is not one aspect of my story that I would change, even the cringeworthy moments, because they've all been the perfect curriculum that I needed to become the woman I have become and am becoming. And so I think, like if we're talking about relationships, I think a lot of times there's regrets and like the one that got away. And
Right.
I think we are forever changed by each collision, each person that we're in relationship with. And, from a soul perspective, I believe we're always connected. So we're never not connected and with that person. But I think there's a way that we believe that all of this isn't unfolding for us in the moments that we think like, it should have been different than it was. It's like, no, there's a divine orchestration to all of this and it's unfolding perfectly.
It's so true.
I also think going back to the idea of this like kind of very unhealthy masculine paradigm that we live in, this idea of like getting over, getting through, letting go, I should be healed, like all these very linear, like, and people don't love it when I'm like, doesn't work like that. You don't get to get over somebody. You don't get to get through this thing. That's all of those, even that language, you integrate it. You learn to have a different relationship to it, but it doesn't go away. And the more we fight to make it go away, the more we fight to get over, to get through, to let go of, we're actually hurting ourselves. We're not helping the process of it. The process is of integration. We want to learn to find compassion and to grieve when the grief feels relevant and present and there, and then move forward when we feel like we've let it go. And then, and it comes in waves and it changes and it evolves. And that's the process. That's it. There is no such thing as letting go or getting over. I just don't believe it.
Wow.
Yeah, we talk a lot about how we're a society that doesn't know how to grieve.
Oof.
That's what I was that's what it made me think
We
about.
have no idea.
Yeah,
Grief.
and that's another one of those circular processes that we think should be like, I should be over this by now. This should be a linear process. And it's just not like that.
Not how the universe works.
And it's not a compassionate way to hold ourselves in our humanity.
Oh, you guys are so good. I'm just like, this is so good, so powerful. Truly, that's like, I'm just getting these feelings. Okay. How to be more independent from your significant other without hurting them, which makes me think of attachment styles. And maybe this is it. We might need to really look at this.
Well, I mean, I guess I would ask this person about their fear of hurting the other person by being their beautiful, whole, authentic, autonomous, independent self. What are you afraid of? I mean, yes, we can all say we're afraid of hurting somebody's feelings. Nobody wants to actively hurt somebody they love. I get that. But is it really, are you really afraid of hurting them? Or are you afraid of something else? Because going back to how, Dené and I talk about codependency to death, it's kind of like the hill I'm willing to die on about how just codependent of a society we are, period. It is just what we are taught is love. We are taught codependency and love are synonymous, and I think that you talk a lot about interdependence, but it's like it's two autonomous, sovereign beings that coexist together, build each other up, support each other, but it doesn't look like this. And so if you're feeling like you can't be that big, authentic, independent is the word they used, self, we probably should look in some of the codependent ways that the partnership has started to exist in.
I get like a weird feeling about that one. I'm just like, it feels like control, like a lot of control.
Well, I love that you said control because when we talk about codependency versus hyperindependence versus interdependence, which is sort of like the space that we're attempting to practice being in more, in codependency, we get off on being needed. And so there's safety in like, if you need me, you're not going anywhere, right? And so I sometimes am doing that to the detriment of another person. And I love in Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed, she talks about how there's no such thing as one-way liberation. And I have found that in the space of me coming more into myself and healing, it inevitably shifts the energy for that other person and they get to move and rise into more empowered sense of self as well. But I gotta, again, trust in them and believe in that. And a lot of times there's a way that we aren't doing that because and this is like one of those uncomfortable truths to get real with ourselves about. If someone isn't as strong in their sense of self, or if they need me more, then I believe I'm safe in this attachment.
I have purpose.
And that's not actually the most loving way to meet someone we care about.
No, it's not. There's so many good ones. Okay, how to balance each other's love languages and needs.
This is one of me and Dené's
How do you feel about love languages? I felt interesting.
Not my favorite.
No, it's interesting. I think the love languages certainly have a lot to do with our childhood wounds. So the things that feel like
attachment styles, right?
Well, it's more like, what did I not get as a child? I mean, there's been research, because the thing about the love languages is they're not based in research. Now, there has been more research recently where they've talked about, what is this? Like, where did this come from? Why did this book by Gary Chapman become such a big thing? And so they started researching on the back end and started realizing that, like, if I say that my love language is words of affirmation, it's probably because I didn't get a lot of words growing up.
100%.
Right? Which seems pretty obvious, right? But like, that's where it comes from. And so I think there's validity in knowing, like, this is what makes me feel filled up and makes me feel valued. There's never a bad thing when it comes to knowing yourself, right? More. Yeah. But when it turns into a bad thing is...
Well, what I find with couples happens more often is that I sort of use the love language vernacular as a way of demanding. And I don't say demanding lightly.
Yeah,
demanding that my partner meet my needs or meet me in the love language in the way that I long to be met. Now, what I find more effective is if I really take responsibility for filling myself up with my words of affirmation, with my, like, all of those things that we might look for in another person. I fill my own cup with that. And then I pour into my partner from the overflow. And if both people are doing that, there's reciprocity. But if that person isn't doing that, and again, I'm demanding that they do that, that's that same, like, demanding that another person change. And how's that working for you, right? Like, so I think it's just, to me, it's not that the love languages aren't valid, and understanding that that's what feels like love to me is a beautiful thing to understand about yourself. But I think instead of molding someone into someone who gives me words of affirmation, why don't I look for someone who gives me words of affirmation as a qualifier for someone who is the person I would like to love me?
Wow, it's such a good perspective on that.
Yeah. I mean, very, like, John and I have very different love languages.
Noah and I are the same.
Yeah. And
like,
it's
different.
So based on childhood, obviously, right? Mine is acts of service. His is words of affirmation. Not coincidentally, giving words is exceptionally difficult for me, and not coincidentally, like, doing for others first is, like, very difficult for him. I'm also the oldest. He's also the youngest child. There's a lot of those, like, oh, this is typical situation. But so much of our work as a couple has been around exactly what Dené is talking about, which is, like, this concept of needs. What is a need versus what is a want versus what is a desire? I think it's really important, because this word needs is one of those, like, to me, like, annoying pop psychology words now that's gotten overused to death. But it's my needs, and they're not meeting my needs. And a lot of times it feels like just another way to put myself in the victim state and blame the other person for why I'm not happy and satisfied.
I am so glad you said that.
Yeah, I think we use that a lot.
I think we do too. And it's funny because someone asked, what is a daily or weekly practice that couples can do to improve their relationship? Work on your own shit.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry.
Your own work.
Fill your own cup so that you're not looking for someone to fill you up and validate you and make you feel like enough. Because I think that is often the most unloving thing we do in our partnerships. If you use the example that you were just giving, if words of affirmation are not my love language, and someone is constantly reminding me that I'm not giving them enough words of affirmation, that feels unbelievably unloving. And the felt experience of that for the person who that's not their natural way of loving, right? Whereas if I see, like, what did you do? Oh, Vanessa got me gummy bears because I had wanted, like, something sweet the other night. And I, like, literally was like, her acts of service are just like, but if I celebrate, that is the way she loves. It may not be the way I love. I am a words of affirmation person, right? But if we celebrate, like, that's how Vanessa loves me, and I, like, get emotional just thinking about it, that is actually loving her for her, not for loving her for who I believe she should be to be enough for me.
Right. That's so beautiful. I love things like that. Like, no, it's just, it's so nice to, like, do the littlest thing that makes the biggest impact in people's lives or like someone's day. Like honestly, whenever I'm having even just a day or it's not, I will just do something. Like it really does shift the way you move through the day. It just makes you more grateful for the beautiful life that you have, and maybe if it's not so beautiful in that moment, to like find that thing. Yeah. That just makes it shine just like a little bit brighter.
I feel like you're like the queen of gratitude. So like you're so beautiful about speaking to it. And what I find we're missing a lot of times in our romantic partnerships with the conversation around like our needs getting met and where they're not getting met is it is a gift to have someone in our life who loves us in whatever capacity, whether that's a friendship or a romantic partner. Not everyone has that. Real talk.
For who you are, for fully accepting that person with all their stuff and then no longer wanting to change or having to show up in this way to be enough.
Yeah.
Like those are the friends as, we're all evolving or, well, some of us are moving towards that greater evolution to like what it means to really embody our highest self is like those are the relationships that I want to continue to grow with me. And sometimes they don't. And it doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean I can't, love you from arm's length from here. But it's just not everyone is. We're not all moving in the same direction.
And that's okay.
Right. And that's when people get divorced.
Yeah. And
like,
that's okay.
Right.
Right. I mean, like the other night we were at an event. I told you Gabby Bernstein did that event with Sophie Trudeau. And she said something about how we need to stop celebrating longevity as like the cornerstone of a successful relationship. And I was like quiet. And I was like, I clapped and she was like, who's doing that? Because I just believe that in my heart of hearts, I refuse to be one of those people that says congratulations when somebody's like, oh, I'm going to my grandmother and grandfather's 50th wedding anniversary. And I know they hate each other. And they haven't had a conversation in 20 years. Why am I celebrating that?
I'm sorry. That's
so
good.
And I'm like, but you know what I will celebrate? Like when I look at Dené and her ex-husband, Mikey, and how beautiful their relationship is, and they're best friends and they're beautiful co-parents and they respect each other. We go on trips together still. I mean, we're all such good friends. And the way that they look at each other with such love because they chose to let their relationship evolve before they hated each other. It's like we have to wait until we hate each other in order to let ourselves break up. Why? I have such love for every not just man, but obviously even friends too, that have ever been important to me. That doesn't go away just because we're not in relationship anymore.
Entirely.
And I won't let that go away. Even if that person chooses to,
Right.
It's like that, okay. But I don't want to carry that. And I just don't think we need to celebrate that anymore. Congratulations, 50 years. Like, what are we celebrating? Sorry.
No, that's such it's a interesting way to look at it, right?
Yeah.
Because you feel if you don't meet that mark that you failed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Right?
and so much of what we're taught about relationships is that longevity is the marker of success. And something my teacher, Esther Farrell, says is that most of us are going to be in relationship with 2 to 3 people in a lifetime. Now, some of us, that'll be the same person, but others, it'll be different people. But we need to really, I believe, societally normalize the fact that we continue to evolve and grow and change. And we sort of think 0 to 18, we're going to grow and change, and then it stops. We're fully grown at 21. I'm I don't know who that's true for, but it certainly hasn't been the case for me. I'm a complete, I think about myself at 26, 27 when I got married, and I was a different human being.
Oh, and
that was a different lifetime, right? And so it's can we just normalize that we're going to continue to evolve and do it with a little bit more grace, a little bit more acceptance for, this
Change.
Is all part of what it means to be alive.
Okay, I have one more question because this one came up a lot, and I feel like a lot of people probably need help with this one. How to recover from a cheating partner. The looks you guys give each other. I'm sorry.
I feel like we do this thing a lot. You want to take this one?
Yeah. And also, we get a lot of these. You know what I mean? Because we're all shared.
This is what you do.
Like the human experience is so common. We're all in it together. And so it's not like a judgmental haha. It's more like a here we go again.
I felt
Let's do it.
Well, and I think that there's also a lot of ways that we hold some of these conversations through a little bit of a different lens than is often the societal.
People get real mad at us.
Yeah. And so
No,
we're here for it. And we believe that there's always a dance happening between, we believe, I'll speak for you. That there's a dance happening between two people. And so much of, the way that we hold everything in our life experience from a depth psychology perspective is, can I meet this with curiosity, right? Like, what has this thing come into my life to teach me? What is this showing me about me, my patterns, the way that I show up relationally? And I think a lot of times the pain of infidelity is around a cultural narrative that means that somehow I wasn't enough for you, that this is a betrayal that means that you didn't love me and everything between us wasn't real.
Mm-hmm.
I have found that is never the case. And I think we have to get really curious about what motivates us in those moments to step outside of a relational dynamic. And normally it's things about like what was happening for me, the way I was feeling about myself. Sometimes like I felt a sense of aliveness that I hadn't felt in so long. I can't tell you how often it's like someone loses someone in their family. And it's like an existential crisis that happens within that person. And then they do something to make them feel alive, like cheating. Now, does that mean that they didn't love their partner or that their entire relationship has been a lie? I don't think so at all. But I think that there's a tremendous amount of suffering that comes from holding it that way. And, a lot of times when I'm working with couples, when there's infidelity, and certainly like serial infidelity, like someone's been cheating for a long time, I really look at it and hold it through the lens of addiction. And this is something I talk about in my book. It's that, like, if I understand this is something that I was sort of doing to self-soothe or to feel a high, then there's a little bit less like certainly personalizing it from the person who's been cheated on. But also, if my partner has cheated on me, how can I meet it with curiosity? Like, what did that do for you? Help me understand. Now, listen, I don't want to minimize like in the initial shock and the pain of like the betrayal that we're experiencing, that can feel really hard to access. And I think that if we understand that no part of me is ever diminished by someone else's actions, and that's my work to like really reaffirm that for myself, then I can get curious about what was it that you were seeking in that other dynamic, and can we have honest conversations that I think we're really conditioned not to feel like we can have, that really aren't serving our relationship big picture for us to not be real with one another.
Yeah, I think also what we were talking about earlier, even in like therapy, where it's really common. And I mean, there's research on this too, where, the closer I get with my therapist, the less vulnerable and authentic I am with even them. You would think in a therapeutic relationship it wouldn't, but it's true. And that is indicative of how we are with a lot of our relationships. And I think you would probably say the same thing. So often in romantic relationships, it's like, it's the one person that we're supposed to be, air quotes, the most authentic, the most vulnerable, the most intimate with. And yet it's the person that, another Johnism, is like we're doing life around them versus doing life with them, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that Dené and I get a lot of pushback on is people sometimes are like, oh, you're victim blaming by saying that the person who's been cheated on can use this as an opportunity to look at themselves. I don't see it that way at all. But I think it is. It's like, in what ways was I not being honest with myself, with my partner? What wasn't I talking about? What wasn't I bringing to the table, right? I have a really hard time with, and I try not to be too black and white, but I have a hard time believing when somebody's like, it was a complete shock. I truly had zero idea that it was happening. And there's just a part of me that's like, I mean, maybe your conscious mind didn't know that it was happening, but I would almost guarantee if we did a few sessions together, I would get in there and there would be something in you somewhere that felt a disconnection, that felt like we weren't communicating in the way we always had. We weren't as connected as we always, like, you always know, but we don't listen to ourselves. Right. We don't listen to our intuition. We don't, we're so cut off. We're like neck up. I don't know. We lie to ourselves a lot, I think.
Oh,
Oh, yes.
You know?
I think that's people's biggest problem.
All of ours.
In life.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of ours.
Totally.
We're really conditioned to be cut off from our feminine, our intuition, right? And so I think there is a part of us that always knows. But the other thing that you were saying before that I think is so important is to really look at where we have felt like our partner belongs to us. And this is something that I say to couples a lot in terms of like, what is the one thing we can do in our relationship to like keep it like thriving and healthy
together.
and all of those things is really act as if your partner does not belong to you. And I think the number one thing that I see in couples that starts to like pick away at our dynamics over time is a sense of entitlement. And I'll be the first to raise my hand. And like when I was married, I felt entitled to things from my partner. I felt like he belonged to me. There was a lot that he did that I took for granted. And, you know, even in the way that you were speaking about, Noah, there's a reverence and a presence in this dynamic is like a gift in my life that I think we're human, but we lose track of that sometimes. And if we don't say like, if this person weren't here tomorrow, like how would I hold them today? As like a practice, as like a mindfulness practice in our relationships, we can really get into some of these spaces of complacency that aren't really bringing the love that we ultimately do feel for this person.
And resentment. Resentment, because whether we like it or not, or whether we're doing it consciously or not, I start to look at you as the reason why I'm not happy.
Okay. Thank you. That was something I really wanted to talk about.
You start being the reason why I'm not fulfilled. My needs aren't being met. I'm not happy. I'm not this. I'm not that. And, you know, and with John, I mean, we have had conversations where I have said to him, in my mind, loving, the verb actively loving is being in support of whatever makes you feel alive and fulfilled. Even if that hurts me in the process, even if that means our relationship has to end, even if that means it's something that I'm not comfortable with or like I don't want to be a part of or whatever that looks like. I'm like, let's have these real conversations. I want to know you as a soul. I don't ever want to be the reason that somebody feels like they couldn't live their most authentic, fulfilled life. And we do that out of fear, obviously, you know, but and wanting to feel like enough and wanting to feel complete and all of these reasons. But I'm such a, right now I'm in such an active state of like really embracing and practicing relationship anarchy across the board and really just breaking down all of like the cultural bullshit that we've been fed, you know, about romantic, friend relationships, all of it. Mononormativity, heteronormativity, you know, centering romantic relationships. Like it's all nonsense. It's all socially constructed nonsense. Now, if you believe it and it's what makes you feel fulfilled, lovely. But don't just assume that it's what makes you feel fulfilled because it's what you've been told is what should fulfill you.
Right.
Question it. Make a relationship that works for you. Construct something that feels real. But that takes work and it takes bravery and it takes honesty and it might take some hurt feelings. You know?
Oof, you guys have delivered today. I mean, there was no question about that, but I feel like this is one of the longer podcasts that we've done, but I feel like it just needed to be. Like there's just so much. I could literally sit here and like deep dive in a totally different direction because it's just like, this is the stuff I think we need to actually have in our ear and look at the other shit you're paying attention to because that's a lot of the problem. When people are like, what work should I do? I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah,
where are we spending our time?
Yeah.
And I just have to say, a lot of people, you know, I think dating someone in hospitality and a nightclub owner and all this stuff, it's always been this thing like, how can you handle it? And like, Noah travels so much and he's always, and I'm like, that's why it works so well.
What are you talking?
Like we have, you know, and it's like, you do you. And Noah always, like, I'm like, we let each other do ourselves like so beautifully. He's like, sometimes. But, you know, for the majority of it, it's like, go have your, you know, do your thing, your F1 weekend, and it's just this.
But I love that you say the sometimes, Melissa, because I think a lot of times what keeps people from trying to like strive towards some of the things that we talk about, it's like, well, it's just not that easy. And it's like, of course, it's not easy for any of us. Like,
right.
It's hard for us too, but it's a practice. And most of the time I can bring myself back to that higher version of who I want to be. Not always.
Yeah,
sometimes
every now and then. You better
ludicrous.
not go that weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course.
But we're human.
We're going to be human. And I think sometimes not feeling like we can do it perfectly keeps us from even trying. Yes. And I think it's like, no, we can hold this as like the North Star of like what we're working towards. And we get a little closer to that North Star the more that we practice.
Oh, yes. I mean, you two are I think you're really changing the game in therapy and just the way that we're looking at situations or relationships ourselves. And it's really incredible. And I think too, Vanessa, just like growing up with you and like literally knowing you as a little girl, I'm so proud of you. Like, I'm just like, look what you've done. Like, I always knew it though. I knew it. I knew it was in there.
We were always the ones who were like, we're getting out of here. We're going to the big city. We're building something. A little bit of that.
But look at you girls.
It's amazing. Where can everyone find you? Dené, you have a new book. It's out. Is it officially?
A couple weeks. Well, yeah. Okay. So May 28th, it's called Sovereign Love. I'm like, what is the name of it?
Just saying it. That is so cute.
Sovereign Love, a guide to healing relationships by reclaiming the masculine and feminine within. So all of the things that we talked about, like the rise of the feminine and all of these attachment energies that you brought up, all of that's in there. We talk about these relationship dynamics and how they're shifting and evolving right before our eyes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I can't wait to dive in. And what is your Instagram, your website? Where can everyone find you?
So I'm Dené.Logan, Dené Logan on all the other handles. We have a podcast together called Cheaper Than Therapy where Vanessa and I just sit and get a little behind the scenes on our girl talk on all of these things. And we also do coaching sessions and bring on some of our favorite guests. You've been on the podcast.
Yeah, the very beginning.
Wait, I feel like we need to talk about like these workshops that you guys put on. I'm feeling something, some synergies.
There could be some synergies.
Totally.
Yeah, we do. We love them. I mean, we try to do a couple a year. This has been a tricky year, books and things. But yeah, a couple workshops a year, like immersive retreats. We also have an online community. So we do like weekly groups. So talking about democratizing this kind of work, right? Like we keep it very affordable for a reason. There's multiple classes and groups every week that you can attend. And so like if a $150+ a week therapy session isn't feasible for you, great. Group sessions and group therapy, in both of our opinions, is one of the most profound ways to heal and change. Like, period, hands down. So we have that.
Where can people access that?
It's through Cheaper Than Therapy. So you can find it at either of our Instagrams, link trees, all that jazz. The Cheaper Than Therapy community is what we call it. And then
give us all your stuff, Vanessa.
Vanessa S.
You're
Bennet,
an author. You're writing your second book.
Yeah. So I wrote my first book with my now husband, which is new. But it's not me, it's you. And then, I'm in the throes of almost being done with my second book, which is called The Motherhood Myth. And it's all around patriarchal mothering and so much of what we were talking about doing it out of community and how that's kind of set us up, I think, for disconnection to self and really unfulfilling romantic partnerships and kind of what to do about that and how to hopefully reclaim some of that joy.
So good. What's your handle?
Vanessa S. Bennet. I haven't been able to get rid of the damn S.
That's okay. And what's your website?
VanessaBennet.com.
Okay. You guys, this was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you
for the work you're doing, for being here. And it's just something I think that has the ability to really crack us all open and just show up as our real messy selves.
We appreciate you. Thank you for being such a leader in that. Truly.
Thank you.